Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jessica Devereaux in Baltimore. A recent investigation by the Center for Public Integrity has found out how the IRS has not gone after groups who have violated political spending limits, specifically 501c4 group Crossroads GPS, which was founded by former Bush advisor Karl Rove. They go further to even look at the systemic stripping of these regulations. Now joining us to get into this issue is our guest, Thomas Ferguson. Tom is a professor of political science at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and he's a senior fellow of the Roosevelt Institute. Thank you for joining us, Tom.
Hi there.
So, Tom, first of all, explain to us the backstory here. What kind of spending limit did Crossroads GPS violate?
Well, look, there's not supposed. All right, the basic story is if one would have thought. The problem is they may have violated nothing at all, and I don't actually, given the way our laws interpret it. The bottom line on this is that if they're doing political spending, they're supposed to be reporting that either to the FEC or to the IRS. And instead, that would depend on how the IRS classified them. They ought to be classified as a political spending group and not allowed not to report who their contributors are. Instead, the IRS seems to just sit there and look at them and do basically nothing about it, as they and lots of other groups just flout what one would think would be the intent of the law.
So why didn't the IRS go after them? I mean, the Center for Public Integrity mentions how basically the IRS scandal, the Tea Party scandal happened, and that's what set it off. Remind our viewers a little bit about what that's about and how did it sort of defang the IRS from going after Crossroads GPS?
Okay, well, look, the real question here is how do you defang the IRS, period? And, if you followed the General Motors scandal, where they were supposed to have known for years that they had a problem in their cars, and they sat on it. And there was this long investigation, and they concluded, well, gee, it seems like nobody ever bothered to actually do anything, and they spent a lot of time with an internal culture that said to do nothing. It's just like that at the IRS. When you read the Center for Public Integrity investigation, you discover that, gee, they keep cutting down the size of the staff who can deal with this, even as the workload explodes. They don't launch many investigations. You know why? Those cost time and money. Now, in the case of the Tea Party groups, you had folks, as I recall, it was originally in the Cincinnati office, poking around, making some trouble, and then just the IRS just sort of sitting on it for long periods and trying. There were some suggestions that they tried to crack down. Then nobody did much of anything, and then the IRS lost all the files anyway. In the case of the Tea Party one, or so it is said. By the files, I mean the email accounts. What you got here is very plainly something you see over and over in American politics, or just generally American institutions. A regulatory institution that is underfunded, plainly staffed by people who mostly don't want to do the work, who are subject to both short and long-term political pressure. My favorite example of this, and you can think of this in regard to this particular, the IRS case here that we're talking about here, is the old study by George Stigler and some folks who concluded that every time the antitrust division of the Justice Department brought a major antitrust suit, they got their budget cut by Congress in subsequent years. That type of regulatory authority just typifies the American scheme of regulation. And it's perfectly obvious what's driving this, which is that you're trying to pay lip service to have regulation, and then you actually set the situation up so that nobody has an incentive to regulate. If that sounds like the Securities and Exchange Commission or the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, waiving, an occasional exception when they have an unusual chair in an emergency, Well, that's because it is. I mean, you see this pattern over and over, and what you're actually doing is sort of a kind of fraud on the whole population, where you say you're regulating and you're not.
But Tom, how do we get out of this pattern? I mean, what is the solution here? Is it more regulation, more money, public
Okay.
financing? What do we do?
Look, the first thing I wouldn't do is what I am amazed to see some political scientists saying, which is, oh, we just need more money to fix this problem. I mean, more money in the sense we just need more money in politics. That's insane. We need that like we need a hole in the head there. I mean, I basically think the way you fix regulatory agencies is you have to professionalize them, meaning you're going to have to pay people enough to get them to do the job. I mean, a real problem in a lot of regulatory agencies is that they become uh, employment agencies for the regulators, pardon me, for the regulated. That is to say, after a while, you go off and you go do some specialist work, depending on what you are. You know, if you're a lawyer, you might go to work for somebody that is regulated. You go to work for a campaign group and help them bring challenges to what your old office was and things like that. I mean, you've got to end this business of underpaid regulators, and then you've got to sort of get the Congress out of the business of leaning on them like that. I mean, these folks need, I think, multi-year budgets, for example. They can't be in a situation where where Mitch McConnell or somebody will immediately lean on the staff if they go too far. It's often said that the Federal Election Commission is the most abject regulatory agency in the whole government. You know, the stuff that the Center for Public Integrity found on the IRS basically suggests that's not true. The IRS is fully in that category, at least as far as the classification of political groups. I actually think this is a fairly straightforward problem. If you spend money on politics, you should have to over truly tiny sums. You should have to report it.
Right.
And that's not a terribly difficult criterion to get at. It's just the IRS, like the FTC, has totally defaulted on this stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, everybody knows this is a fraud, you know, one just needs to label it as such and treat it as, you know, they sweep the place out. I mean, I do think that those IRS employees that managed to lose their emails on the Tea Party case. The Tea Party people had a complaint. I think there was evidence at the time that they were also targeting some liberal groups. That mostly got the Republicans in Congress, in the House committee, were not interested particularly in that. But there was some evidence of that too. I mean, my sense was that the IRS looked hard at both groups on the left and the right for a while, then drew back. And in the end, you know, on all the big and powerful groups like Crossroads, they don't do hardly anything.
Yeah, yeah.
And
This is definitely an issue, Tom, that we want to have you back on to discuss further. Thank you so much for joining us.
okay, have a good one.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.